of all the issues they really did have. Because again, turnovers aside, that's kind of just how they've been playing lately. It's been like that for the last 5 games where you've had at least 16 turnovers each game.
Mm.
But that's not the only reason you lost this game. There were other reasons that kind of led to your struggles.
And that the turnover specifically, I've said this time and time again in the past couple weeks. It just becomes your identity. It becomes who you are, and no amount of practice, no amount of focusing on your fundamentals is seemingly going to change that. So for the final, 10 games of conference play, and whatever happens in the SEC tournament, where I imagine the season will finally come to an end, you're just going to have to deal with it. You're just going to expect that this team's going to turn the ball over somewhere between 15 and 20 times. And as awful as that sounds, it's just kind of who they are, unfortunately.
No, it is who they are. Like they play sloppy basketball. It's easy to see. Like you don't need to be a fan or not or whoever. You can just watch the game and just see, man, this team is not like they're not functioning the way they should. They don't make the right passes half the time because you see a lot of these sloppy passes that go right out of bounds and stuff. It's the same as it's expecting something different to happen when you watch the same thing happen over and over again. That's the problem here is that you expect something different to happen. Like maybe this is the game where everything changes, but again, it's the little mistakes that continue to really hurt this team, and turnovers are right at the top of that list.
And last night was a game, and we kind of knew Georgia might kind of have the size advantage going into the matchup. But God, it's felt like Carolina was getting shots blocked left and right. Asa Newell for Georgia had 3 blocks on the game. Dylan James had 2 blocks themselves. It just felt like every time they tried to go up at the basket, they were no match for what Georgia had from a size standpoint. And that just, compounds to the issues you're already having on offense with hanging on the ball, where you are potentially getting a shot at the basket and just getting it, stuffed back in your face.
Yeah, that was one issue from last night with going up against those big men. And credit to them, they played really well. Like Asa Newell is a solid player. South Carolina had no answers for him. The problem that I think that there was last night outside of the block shots was I didn't think CMB or Pringle were all that impressive in the paint, to be honest. There were a lot of moments in that game where you see Nick going for a rebound and it's right there. He can get it. But the ball, he doesn't get it. He doesn't end up getting it. It either goes out of bounds or someone else grabs it. It's just things like that where I felt like they lack aggression and they had opportunities to get the rebounds, couldn't do so. There were just also moments in the game where it's like they need to be more physical, but they're not. And so it's just they had a chance last night, but it's just the block shots, the inability to make the simple plays. That's what really hurt them as well.
And really, the only 2 players doing anything consistent throughout the entire game were Colin Murray Boyles and Jamari Thomas, and even they both had their struggles throughout the game. I will say, for CMB, who was quiet for a lot of the night until you got in the second half, when he finally started getting the ball down low and near the basket, he was making plays happen. Like you saw a little bit of that aggressiveness that we've been wanting to see, and him finally kind of, honestly put the team on his back necessarily, but going down there and just making things happen when he got the ball in his hands because nothing else was happening on offense. So if you're looking for kind of a positive, that's one. But again, when you've suffered your eighth loss in a row, there aren't too many necessarily silver linings to be able to point to. And Jamari Thomas, for as well as he played when it came to putting points on the board, I mean, he himself turned the ball over 5 times. So,
Yeah.
it's kind of a double-edged sword there.
There's always good with the bad, and the good was that you got 19 points from Jamari and you got 18 from CMB, but they also racked up 8 turnovers. So that's just not ideal. But the other issue from last night, this kind of gets into the point about that I'm about to make here is, Jacoby Wright went scoreless last night. Zach Davis went 2 of 10 from the floor for only 6 points. And Morris Ugasuk, all your guard starters right there combined for 8 points last night. That's not good enough to cut it. But the stretch in this game, and I think the guard play has been really, honestly, just not good enough throughout conference play. It's very lacking in comparison to what Michi Johnson and Talon Cooper provided last year, obviously. But there was a stretch in this game where South Carolina was only down 18-16 with about 10 minutes left to go in the first half, right? And then they proceed to not make another shot until I think the 2:20 mark in the first half. So they went the halfway, from the halfway point on in the first half. They went about 1 for 11, whatever it was, from the field, and that's just not going to be good enough. When you go so long without a basket, it was like a 7-minute stretch without making a shot. They got a free throw from Martin Conyers, but other than that, like, they can't make anything happen on the floor. And I think it's a big issue when, specifically with your guards, they can't seem to create shots from the perimeter, mid range. I just saw a lot of not shooting the ball, moving it around, and trying to kick it out to the big men, and then they get blocked. That's kind of where it led to. Is like you get the ball to Nick with like a few seconds left on the shot clock, and he's got to go up, and he gets blocked. That's kind of where some of that came from last night. But yeah, I mean that stretch without any made shots really killed you, because if you're Georgia, you took full advantage of it. That's why you were able to go up by 14 points in the going into halftime, and then hold on to that lead the rest of the way.
Yeah, they went over 6 minutes without scoring at all, and then they went about 7.5, almost 8 minutes without any field goals prior to halftime. Like I said, 14-point game in the half, and they shot better in the second half, but it was kind of an ebb and flow thing. You never really felt like they were truly closing the gap on Georgia. They went on a smaller run towards the end of the game where they got it down to single digits, but it never really felt like they had a true opportunity to close the gap, because every time it seems like they would score, Georgia would go down the other end and score themselves. So the Dogs were able to kind of manage that gap in the second half and end up with an 11-point win that concludes now a winless month of January. Again, 0-8 in conference play. And I think the worst optic of all, you're now under 500. You are 10-11 on the season. You were 10-3 coming out of non-con, which very solid. And, we knew the conference slate was going to be tough, but to go from being in the tournament a year ago to now very likely being under 500 when it's all said and done, unless they just suddenly turn it around, which doesn't seem like they're going to. That's bad. From a 1 year difference to the other, that's a bad look.
Yeah, it's been rough. I'm not gonna lie. It's been rough. I think just the season has just not been good for them by any means. Like we figured they were going to have a little bit of a drop off. That's expected when you win 26 games last year and tie a program record for most, or set a program record for most wins in a season. Like, it's just you set the bar so high last year that anything you did this year was going to be fall in comparison. But the drop off has been tremendous. Like, you went from that to most likely, number one, missing the tournament, and then number two, maybe going under 500, maybe even having the worst season in program history from an SEC standpoint. Like, 10 games left to go. I think they can get a win or two somewhere along the lines, but this conference is ridiculously tough, and I just don't know if they're going to be able to stack many wins to get over 500. But I mean, at this point, it's just the season that just feels like a wash in many respects, and I just think you got to just hope next year they're able to, because you're going to lose a lot of guys after the season probably. Hope you fill the gaps and bring in, better players to kind of fit what they're trying to do.
Well, that's what's frustrating is you viewed last night as one of the, if not the most winnable games you've had out of the first 8 so far in terms of the optics going into it. Now, yes, it is going on the road, and Georgia very good at home so far this year. Last night's win improved them to 12-1 in Stegman Coliseum, and playing on the road in the SEC anywhere is obviously going to be tough. But again, they were coming off a 4-game losing streak. They're a team that struggled with turnovers. Like, you had your best opportunity to beat them based on how you stacked up against them going to the game. And again, once you kind of went on that drought in the second half, the game was pretty much over from there.
Yeah, I mean, look, it's
first half, excuse me.
Yeah, I mean, look, South Carolina just couldn't do enough good last night. Like, yes, they had their moments, but like overall, this game just never felt close. And I don't know. I mean, people are probably going to be, the opinion of Lamont probably changes for many after this, just because of how bad the season has been. But next year is going to be the year where it's like, okay, can they get this thing back on track, or is it going to be more of a consistent thing where 2 of the last 3 years have been really rough, and he gets a pass for year 1, year 2 was great, but this year is ending up as another year that's kind of reminiscent of that 22-23 season.
Well, the next stretch doesn't get any easier. Texas A&M coming to town on Saturday, ranked at 13th. You go on the road to number 12 Kentucky. You play number 23 Ole Miss, and then guess what? You got number 5 Florida on the road coming up on February the 15th, before you finally see another unranked team in LSU on the 18th. So not going to get any easier. We'll hear from Coach Paris again coming up tomorrow night on Carolina Calls. at 6 o'clock. Don Staley speaking on Carolina calls tonight at 6 o'clock, all right here on The Game. Now that we've hit the 8th straight loss for the South Carolina men's basketball team, I have a theory on something that I think really needs to change. As big of a signature as it may be, I think it's time to switch things up. That's coming up next. It is The Extra Point. Tyler Head and Jack Beltry along with you on your Wednesday here on The Game.
Perfect climate controlled conditions where you can also win some dough. Well, sign up first in the Pro Swing Golf Classic. It's a 3-day event, January 30th through February 1st. $150 to register a 2-man team. Bookings are available 8 a.m. to 8 p.m. Food from Bonefish Grill included. You can win $1,000 for first place, $750 for second, and $500 for third. Plus, we'll be drawing Gamecocks baseball tickets that someone could win by just registering. Call Pro Swing at 803-528-1617. 1075 The Game, broadcasting live from the Herndon Chevrolet Studios. Take up to $20K off new Silverado. Buy or shop online today and see why Herndon Chevrolet makes you smile. Together, let's drive.
Lowe's knows how to help make your Super Bowl 59 party a touchdown. Let us help you prep your home to host with top brands like Charbroil, Blackstone, and LG, so you can be the MVP of game day. Plus, use the Lowe's app to find what you need for a seamless shopping run. Or huddle up with our Lowe's Red Vest associates to help make all your game time hosting decisions.
Getting your guaranteed maximum refund with TaxSlayer feels like saddling up and chasing down that big old with TaxSlayer Simply Free and get your guaranteed maximum refund. Simply Free is available to a limited number of taxpayers. See taxslayer.com for eligibility.
Is your crawl space damp or musty? Water in your crawl space can cause wood to rot and creates an environment for mold and mildew that can make its way inside your home. Canty Foundation Specialist specializes in crawl space repair. Call us today for your free inspection.
You said you're at the Country Inn?
Yeah. Trying to think what I'm nearby here. Let's see. I'm probably like only 10 minutes from the arena.
Your garage door could be a ticking time bomb.
Bridge.
Seriously, did you know 20 to 30,000 garage door accidents happen every year in the U.S.? How does that even happen? Well, your garage door has 20 or more working parts.
Is it the Inn and Suites by Radisson?
Let's see.
Breaks and you get stuck. Text tech.
Yeah, it's by Radisson.
Okay. I'm trying to looking this up on here to see what you're near.
Yeah, Country Inn and Suites by Radisson, Athens, Georgia.
The garage door expert in Columbia.
Fresh Market.
To help you with same-day service. So if your garage door
I'm near a fish gallery.
Yeah. This. Hold on. I feel like I know where you're at.
Exclusive link to special limited time savings. Text the word
McDonald's.
now. Text
Ipsbridge.
Kickstart your day.
Back up here.
With your Carolina Pick-Me-Up, sponsored by South Carolina's largest injury law firm, Joint State Injury Lawyers. If you're injured, call all nights today.
Are you a Gamecock fan that's looking for flexibility to attend the games you want without committing to season tickets? If so, the Gamecock Go Pass is for you. For only $20 a month, your Gamecock Go Pass subscription provides you with access to all non-conference football games, most men's and women's basketball and baseball games.
Oh, yeah. Okay, I know where you're at. Yep. You're just off of Atlanta Highway.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah, I used to live about if you leave your hotel and go to the right, it's about, I don't know, 2 or 3 miles down the road near the Goodwill.
Oh, sweet.
Yeah, so that's where I used to, not too far from where I used to live at.
Nice. Yeah, not a bad time out here. Always enjoy coming out to Athens.
Never a bad time.
No.
Taxes for you. They'll get your refund so you can do more with it right in Credit Karma. Now, this is taxes. Intuit Credit Karma with TurboTax. See guarantee details at turbotax.com/guarantees. Experts only available with TurboTax.
And welcome back in. It is the Extra Point. Tyler Head and Jack Beltry along with you on your Wednesday here on the game. Reminder, tomorrow and Friday, whole 107.5 The Game crew going to be out once again at Pro Swing out in Forest Acres for their first annual Pro Swing Golf Classic 3-day event happening tomorrow through Saturday. If you want to sign up, still can. $150 for a two-person team. Bookings available 8 a.m. to 8 p.m. Food's included from Bonefish Grill. Can win $1,000 for first place, $750 for second place, $500 for third place. We're also going to be drawing Gamecock baseball season tickets for somebody that just registered to sign up. So if you want to be a part of it, give Pro Swing a call at 803-528-1617. Again, 803-528-1617. Again, we're going to be out there all day long tomorrow from 6 a.m. and Friday from 6 a.m. to 6 p.m. During the first annual Pro Swing Golf Classic. All right, Jack, continue our conversation with Gamecock men's basketball. For anybody that's listened to me on the station for a while, you know I am very, very superstitious. And one thing about superstition, I have a lot of great like jerseys and stuff in my closet that, spent some money on, given to me as gifts and stuff like that I cannot wear anymore because for whatever sports team they represent, something bad happened or I couldn't watch my team win while wearing said jersey. So I've retired it. It's sitting in my closet. I will never wear it again because I deem it to be bad luck. As much of a signature as the quarter zip has become for Lamont Paris, I think it's time to switch it up because it's clearly not working anymore. You're 0-8 in conference play, have not won a game in over a month. This season's going off the rails. Again, I know it's his thing, but maybe a nice polo or a hoodie on the sidelines coming up this weekend.
I mean,
you gotta try something, right?
I mean, yeah, I guess. What do you do? Just cut off like the sleeves of the quarter zip or something?
No, because then you still have a quarter zip.
But that's his signature look.
It is his signature look. And look, here's the thing: when Carolina was winning and Carolina was going to the tournament last year, and everything was nice and fuzzy and warm, we loved it. And we're talking about it every single this black quarter zip has this record and the white one has this record, and he's got a red one that rolled out that they won against Kentucky or whatever it may be. It's all fun and cute. When you're not winning, everything is under scrutiny. And I, as superstitious as I am ready to make a change. And I don't know, again, polo, hoodie, long sleeve t-shirt, whatever, something along those lines. We got to change it up.
I'm going to be honest. I don't even remember the last time I've seen him. I don't even know if I've ever really seen him in person without the quarter zip on. Obviously his introductory press conference a few years ago, he had a suit on, but other than that, everywhere this dude goes, football. Oh, go ahead.
Obviously, when they were in the Bahamas now a year and a half ago, he did some media stuff in a Hawaiian shirt.
Yeah.
That's the only time I remember seeing his arms.
I have it's quarter zip everywhere. During football season, whenever he's the celebrity starter or whatever and doing the Gamecocks chant, it's all quarter zip.
He did his July presser in a
quarter zip.
When I know for a fact it was 100 degrees that day.
It's a black quarter zip most of the time too, which is the insanely funny part because it's crazy. I liked how he spiced it up last night wearing I guess a garnet quarter zip, but it's definitely a brighter color.
It's still a quarter zip though.
But it's still a quarter zip.
And I'm being silly about it, obviously, but
but it's
when
true,
you're at this point, no change is a bad idea, right?
No, I think it's fine. I don't think he's gonna end up. I don't think he's gonna do it because I just think that's his look. And it's fine. I don't know. I mean, what would you, if you had to decide, like what it needs to change to, or what you would like to see it change to? I mean, do you go like a button up, like a polo?
I'd go button up because that's still like a quarter zip is seen as a nicer piece of clothing, right? That hey, if you're going to a wedding or a nice event or something like that, and you throw on a nice quarter zip, a good brand name like an Izod or something like that, that's seen as a fairly decent dress for those kind of events. So I feel like if he went with like the button up polo or something like that, an Under Armour polo, that would that fall in line with with the nice aesthetic that Coach Paris brings. But again, as superstitious as I am, I'm looking at those quarter zips saying that luck's run out. You got to change something up.
I think the Gamecock fan base community would probably explode if they saw him not in a quarter zip on Saturday night.
But okay, so let's say on Saturday night against A&M, he comes out there in just a regular polo or something along those lines. Twitter's going to lose its mind. Oh my God, Coach Paris is not in a quarter zip and all that kind of stuff. And they go out there and beat number 13 Texas A&M. Well, guess what? People are going to be demanding that for the Ole Miss game, you better be wearing a polo.
Oh, totally. That's going to happen. The moment something good happens, it doesn't even have to be necessarily what he wears. It's just something that they do. I don't know what, but it's just they got to do something different in general. Because look, this losing streak, the last thing you want to see is this team go 0-18. Like someone made a good point last night that if they go 0-18, everyone's going to remember that 50 years from now, whatever. But you go 1-17, like a few people will remember it. Like people will remember a winless season. So you don't want to do that, but you got to change something up. I think it's more so on the court. You got to obviously change things up. But with the quarters up and whatnot, I'm for it if it means they get a win, maybe.
Well, I don't necessarily know what you can change up on the court because you kind of have what you have at this point. It's not like you have some kind of magical gem on your bench that you can suddenly turn to and say, okay, go out there, play more minutes and become a superstar. Like Cam Scott is the one thing that people would point to, but even he, in the minutes that he's played, I know he's been sick for the past couple games, but he got out there last night and played some minutes, but he's not performed up to the level that I think a lot of people thought he was going to. And, a guy like Jordan Butler that transferred in from Missouri hasn't been what people thought he was going to be either. And you just don't have depth on your bench. You can suddenly say, okay, let's shift the starting lineup and put 2 or 3 new guys in the starting 5 and see if that works, because you don't really have any of those pieces.
I think at some point, though, you got to be able to, if the season is like, let's say you're in the final stretch of the season, you're like 0-15, whatever the case might be, and there's no hope. I think at that point, you got to start looking ahead to the future and start playing like these guys that you just mentioned, like Cam Scott, Jordan Butler, because these are the guys that you will have back next year, because most of these other guys, pretty much your entire starting 5 is going to be gone, I think, after this season. We'll see what happens with a guy like Zach Davis and CMB and all that, but most of these guys are not going to be here. So I think it'd be wise to try and see what you got, playing these guys for more minutes, getting them more experience. And if they stink, they stink. Like, just let them go out there and see what you got from them. Because it's not the worst thing in the world. And that would be the change I'd be down with, to be honest.
Yeah, and you're absolutely right. Again, theoretically, you could always go on a run in the SEC tournament and make it in that way. Though that's looking like less and less of a possibility, but you do have to at some point start thinking about the future. And yes, you still want to try and win games, but if you feel like, baptizing Cam Scott by fire by just throwing him out there for more minutes and learning along the way for these final 10 games in conference play and whatever you can do in the tournament, if that sets you up better for next year, do it. Because again, like you said, it can't really get any worse at this point, right?
No, it's just you're not going to have a lot of guys back next year, like I said. And I think it's just wise to give these guys more minutes rather than have them sit on the bench. Like they can't use a red shirt right now anyway. They've already played in the game, so guys like that Austin Hero, maybe even the other guys like Cogshell and Piper. Like, it's just see what you got, because it's the season's by the day is continuing to just go down the drain.
Well, Coach Paris, if you're hearing the sound of my voice, I will buy you the polo, for crying out loud. If it gets you to wear it on Saturday night, I'll buy it. We got to switch something up because, again, nothing's working right now. And if that means abandoning the beloved quarter zip, I'm here for it.
Yeah, we'll see if he, I would say 0% chance he does it, but I'd like to see it, to be honest.
Yeah, again, hey, if they keep losing, I'm going to keep bringing it up.
Yeah.
I'm surprised it's taking me this long to get to this point, but I'm going to keep bringing it up if it keeps happening.
Hey, fight the good fight.
Exactly. I'm not going to go down without a fight. And hey, it can't hurt, and can't get any worse at this point, in my opinion. We'll talk some Gamecock football coming up next. Bill Connolly put out his list of top 100 games of 2024. Did the Gamecocks make the list, and how many times did they make the list? You might be surprised by that. Coming up next, it's the Extra Point. Tyler Head and Jack Beltry along with you on your Wednesday here on The Game. Tyler Head once again telling you about our friends over at Twin Peaks. Tell you about them all the time, but I'll remind you once again, there's truly no better place taking all the great sports action for whatever sport you want. Football, baseball, coming up here soon. Basketball, obviously, in the midst of its season right now. And TVs as far as the eye can see over at Twin Peaks, taking all that great action. The big game coming up here in a couple weeks to wrap up the pro football season. And on that day, show up early and cash out quarterly, because the first 100 fans show up for the big game on that Sunday, get a free square for a chance to win a Twin Peaks gift card at the end of every quarter. Plus, every fan scores free fried pickles just for showing up. It's that simple. Show up, get free fried pickles, and enjoy the big game with our friends over at Twin Peaks in the Vista. Also enjoy those 29-degree draft beers, and there's extensive category of any kind of drink you can imagine with all that great sports action and amazing food as well at Twin Peaks over in the Vista.
Silverados. Yes, you heard that right. Up to $20,000 off. Don't wait. Head over to HerndonChevy.com today and drive home in the truck of your dreams. Chevy, together let's drive.
AAA at the end of the show.
Very
Call 803-510-5447 for complete details.
Lowe's knows how to help you save time and money, no matter the job. That's why we can deliver supplies to your job site as soon as same day, so you have more time to get the job done. Because when you need it fast, we've got you covered. Lowe's knows pros. Valid on eligible in-stock orders and select zip codes. Placed by 2 p.m. for same-day delivery by 8 p.m. Subject to driver availability. Fees vary based on purchase. More terms apply. See Lowe's.com/same-day delivery for details.
Progressive knows finding your new home was a dream come true. You wanted a colonial with high ceilings, hardwood floors, and a peaceful neighborhood. And you found it. Now, every Saturday at 6 a.m., you get to wake to the sound of your neighbor's leaf blower. Progressive can't save you from your noisy neighbors, but we can save you money when you bundle your home and auto with us. Get a quote at Progressive.com. Progressive Casualty Insurance Company, affiliates, and other insurers not available in all states.
Strengthening the lives of children and families is a passion. Turn that passion into results as a child welfare case manager. Learn more at dss.sc.gov. This message is sponsored by the South Carolina Department of Social Services. O'Harris Public House is the sweet deal of the week. Get a $50 gift certificate for just $25. Log on to 1075thegame.com. Begin this Friday at 9 a.m. to get your $50 gift certificate to O'Harris for just $25.
Lights and more here with RoofingAllAmericans.com. There's a storm coming. No, I'm not saying storm, but hurricane season, storm season, wind season. It seems like it's just like football season all year round. It's storm season all year round. And Roofing All Americans wants to block and tackle all the headaches that come with roof repair, roof maintenance, and just handling a roof and maintaining your home. With Roofing All Americans, it's been over 20 plus years that these guys have been in the construction and roofing business, and they want to take care of your toughest roofing and construction needs. Call them today at 803-250-1395 for a free, no obligation quote. That's 803-250-1395 or Roofing All Americans. Or check us out on the web at roofingallamericans.com. That's roofingallamericans.com.
Integrated media Game TV.
Sponsored by Shepherd's Glass, a true reflection of quality.
The Game TV.
Sponsored by Shepherd's Glass.
The Extra Point with your hosts Tyler Head and Jack Melcher. Gamecock Central.
Sponsored by AAA Heating and Air.
On the Game Network. And don't forget to download the 107.5 The Game app.
And welcome back in. It is the Extra Point. Tyler Head and Jack Melcher along with you here on your Wednesday on the Game. As we are now fully in the off season of college football, it's easy to kind of go back and reflect on the season that was, the year that was. And Jack, you and I, we talked about it plenty on how exciting this past college football season was. And our guy, Bill Connolly from ESPN, yesterday published his list of top 100 games of the 2024 college football season that featured a ton of upsets, ton of surprises, all those kind of things. And I'd say the Gamecocks are featured pretty prominently on this list. Towards the top, they played a lot of interesting games, though they didn't end up winning all those, unfortunately.
Yeah. So there were a lot of games on this list that South Carolina was featured in, like you said, albeit going through the list, I wasn't expecting them to all be kind of clumped together with the 34 spot through 37 spot belonging to the Gamecocks. But yeah, a lot of entertaining games this season, no doubt.
So the highest game that Connolly has on this list is actually number 21, which funny enough was the Citrus Bowl with Illinois. And when you are reading this article, he doesn't necessarily go in and break down every single game specifically. He kind of highlights a couple ones, in paragraphs. And I don't think he mentioned anything specifically about the Citrus Bowl. I would imagine the beef between Beamer and Bielema probably has a lot to do with that, because again, it was something that, like, here's the thing. People aren't going to remember the game itself for really anything that happened on the field. They're going to remember, like, the nonsense that went on between Beamer and Bielema as just a goofy thing that happened in a bowl game. So I feel like that's probably propping this game up pretty highly. And again, you did have a game that came down to the last couple of minutes, and South Carolina trying to stop Illinois from, running out the clock. Weren't able to do that. And obviously the Fighting Illini walked away with the victory, but it was a back and forth game between two fairly even teams. So overall good, but I think the shenanigans between the coaches kind of took it to another level for a lot of people.
Oh, for sure. For sure. That, again, you hit the nail on the head. I'm not like, no one's going to remember this game for Josh McCray running all over South Carolina in the game. Maybe Illinois fans will remember that, but the good majority of college football fans are probably going to remember this for the Bielema Beamer shenanigans on the field and all that. Some even will probably remember it for Nicky Manwari, not being out there on the field at after halftime, basically quitting on his team in that moment. So it's stuff like that this game will get overshadowed by, which is unfortunate because in reality, it actually was a really good game. And I can see why it's up so high on this list, but you're definitely not wrong about the fact that the Bielema Beamer thing, that probably propped this thing up a little bit higher than it probably should be.
So the next set of games are all clumped together, 34 and 35. Go hand in hand for kind of how they finished and certainly how they're going to be remembered for Gamecock fans. You have the Missouri game at number 34, and then you have the Clemson game at number 35. So obviously both those where Carolina has a late score that I think for both Rocket Sanders with his catch and run that scored the game-winning touchdown against Missouri, as well as Lenore Sellers. And look, Sellers obviously still has more to write in terms of what he's going to do here as a South Carolina Gamecock. And we certainly hope he has, more big moments. But in terms of one solid memory that I think everybody will always remember of him, no matter what the future holds for him as a Gamecock and in his future career in the NFL, the run he had against against Clemson, third and Sellers, as I like to call it, that scored the game-winning touchdown there. Obviously immortalized in history. Same thing with Rocket Sanders and his catch and run to score the game-winning touchdown against Missouri. So interesting that those two games are kind of clumped together at 34 and 35.
It's interesting in general, these four games, including the 36 and 37 spot, which we'll get to here in a second, are all clumped together. I know there are a lot of games on this list. I know you got to cover a lot of teams and stuff to get everyone in. And I know there's some obviously better games on the list. I just think it's a little bit weird, a little bit easy that these games are all put together when, for instance, I feel like the 35 and 34 spot with the Clemson game and the Missouri game, you could argue those games probably should be a little bit higher. I would put those over the Citrus Bowl any day. Even the LSU game. I know that's a game that South Carolina lost and stuff, but that was a really good game. Like, all things considered, game day in town. The stakes were high for a week 3 matchup. Like, it was a good game, all things considered, like I said. So I don't know. I don't agree with all these being put together in one thing just to kind of talk about South Carolina and then move on to the next thing. But there's no doubt that Clemson game and that Missouri game, I mean, those are two of the best games that a lot of people probably watched if you pay attention to South Carolina.
Like you mentioned, 36 and 37. You got the Alabama game at 36 and LSU at 37. Those two games, like the Missouri and Clemson game, very similar in comparison, with two teams that I think on paper everybody thought was better than South Carolina, that Carolina played all the way down to the wire. And from an entertainment standpoint, obviously those games very, very entertaining, both of them coming down to the very end for Carolina fans. Obviously, it's a game, both games of what could have been. If you don't have Lenore Sellers go out before halftime against LSU, you obviously don't have a couple of controversial calls go LSU's way. What happens in that game? Obviously, the Alabama game with the if you convert the 2-point conversion, if Lenore Sellers does not throw the interception when South Carolina has the ball last after they mount their little comeback there. But those things those games kind of set the table, I feel like, for what the final 6 games of the regular season were going to be. Because after the Alabama game, you're sitting at 3-3. We've talked about plenty of times, which way is the season going to go? Are you going to go 6-6? You're going to go 4-8 or 5-7 again, or what's it going to be? And, you obviously went on the stretch run and closed it out with 6 very solid wins, several of them against ranked teams. So we saw the potential of South Carolina to be able to go toe-to-toe with seemingly better teams at that point in the season, not being able to get the job done. And then after that, finally kind of click it into gear, say, okay, now they're being able to close games and win these things out.
Yeah, we didn't know what was going to come after that Alabama loss. Like, it definitely felt like they were getting closer to being a better program, better team this year. But at the time, you're still thinking, like, all right, this is probably a 6-7 win team. But kudos to them, man. Like, those hard times they had just went through, and they also lost to Ole Miss in blowout fashion, sandwiched in between. So you could have looked at it like, oh man, like the season's kind of getting down in the gutter. We better turn around quick, and they did. They could have let it hinder the way everything went, but they didn't. They bounced back and went on a really remarkable run to end the year, winning 6 straight before losing in the Citrus Bowl. But this team, they definitely should have probably won those games. I think the LSU game, you're up 17-0 right away, and you blew that game with LSU going on a 29-7 run. That is that's a tough pill to swallow. And then the Alabama game, you had your chances, but again, it's good to see that South Carolina was able to go toe-to-toe with the best in this conference for many years, and we'll see what happens this upcoming season with going to Baton Rouge and Alabama coming here. I would be very interested to see if South Carolina can pull the reversal on those games.
And, a vast majority of these games for Carolina were very competitive and, very entertaining just from a neutral standpoint. Old Dominion, unfortunately, was a tight game all the way down to the wire. You ran away against Kentucky, tight game against LSU, blew out Akron as you expected, got run over by, Ole Miss when they came to town, but tight game against Alabama. You handled Oklahoma pretty easily. You pulled away late against A&M, but that was still a tight game, seemingly at halftime there. Pulled away from Vanderbilt the second half, tight game against Missouri, blew out Wofford as expected, tight game against Clemson, then a tight game against Illinois in the bowl game as well. So from a purely entertainment standpoint, Carolina, and rightfully so, got five games on this list. Played a lot of games that if you were a casual person just flipping around saying, let me tune into Carolina because they're probably going to end up being in some kind of dogfight with whoever they're playing.
Yeah, I mean, look, they got 5 games on the list. I think that feels about right. The only other one I'd probably throw on there is the A&M game, just because that was a really, really great game overall, obviously for South Carolina. But, I feel like they got this list right for the most part. Again, I just wouldn't have had all these Carolina games, losses and wins clumped together.
So that's where Carolina falls on the list with 5 games at 21, the Citrus Bowl, then 34, 35, 36, and 37 being other games happening in the regular season for South Carolina. What does Bill Connelly think the best games of 2024 were? With that coming up next, wrap up hour number 1 of the Extra Point. Tyler Head and Jack Beltry along with you on your Wednesday here on The Game.
Here's what's coming up on the game. The Schroeder's Killer Road Show rolls on.
It's at the end of the hour, right?
Yeah, end of the hour.
Okay, sweet.
Thursday and Friday from 6 a.m. to 6 p.m. Broadcasting live from the first annual Pro Swing Golf Classic.
Your home of the Gamecocks. 107.5 The Game. This is Boomer Esiason with Sportsman Edge, sponsored by Fisher Investments. The son of a legendary head coach, Brian Schottenheimer, appreciates what these men have to put up with in terms of the owners who hire them. But when Jerry Jones told the media Schotty was a less than glamorous hire, and even a risky one, that had a sting. Oh boy, the Cowboys are off to a great start. A Boomer Esiason.
Saving for retirement was tough enough for us.
Yes, and navigating markets can be challenging at times.
I understand. That's why at Fisher Investments, we take a disciplined approach with your investments.
Tell us more about that.
We take an active approach to money management, positioning your portfolio for opportunities we see ahead.
So all your clients get the same portfolio?
No, we tailor your portfolio to your individual goals and needs.
What about communication? We don't like being left in the dark.
We check in regularly to keep you informed on the markets and your portfolio.
Which means you'll help us stay on track.
Yes, our goal is your comfortable retirement. And as a fiduciary, we always put your interests first, because we do better when you do better. At Fisher Investments, we're clearly different. Learn more at FisherInvestments.com.
Investing in securities involves the risk of loss.
Alan Kennington, responsible for this ad. Office in 1440 Broad River Road, Columbia, South Carolina.
It's called an accident for a reason. It wasn't planned, but it happened. It's not your fault, but somehow you're the one paying. Medical bills, lost wages, and the pain. You need someone on your side to fight for you. With over 85,000 cases resolved in 12 offices across the state, you need South Carolina's largest injury law firm on your side. You need Joyce Silk now.
Come see the entire line of Whirlpool appliances at 1421 Atlas Road. Whirlpool offers bigger, better, and more efficient appliances, and Jeffers McGill offers the best in customer service and low prices. Jeffers McGill and Whirlpool, your home team.
Lowe's knows to help make your Super Bowl 59 confidence touchdown. Let us help you prep your home to host with top brands like Charbroil, Blackstone, and LG, so you can be the MVP of game day. Plus, use the Lowe's app to find what you need for a seamless shopping run. Or button up with our Lowe's Red Vest associates to help make all your game time hosting decisions.
Getting your guaranteed maximum refund with TaxSlayer feels like chasing down that big old TaxSlayer Simply Free and get your guaranteed maximum refund. Simply Free is available to a limited number of TaxSlayer. See TaxSlayer.com.
Welcome back in, Gamecocks. It's not the Gamecock Central Takeover Hour. That's not till 11 o'clock. I inevitably screw up the show name at least once a day. It is the Extra Point. Tyler Head and Jack Beltry along with you here on your Wednesday. Reminder tonight, Coach Staley on Carolina calls at 6 o'clock as she talks about her team having a couple days off before they take on Auburn coming up on Sunday. By the way, Asia Wilson's jersey retirement on Sunday, 2-2 of course. So that'll be cool over at Colonial Life Arena. We're taking a look at Bill Connolly's top 100 games of the 2024 college football season, and he crowned the number one game, Vanderbilt's upset of then number one Alabama, 40-35 out in Nashville. And in terms of a shock factor, I don't think there was any game this year that could really top that. You know what I mean? Because if you told anybody going into the year that Vanderbilt's going to beat Alabama, they would have looked at you like you were crazy and tried to admit you into a mental asylum, right? Because in no world should that happen. And not only did it happen, Vanderbilt dominated this game. It wasn't like, Auburn or Alabama turned the ball over 12 times and you had a lucky field goal or something at the end. No, Vanderbilt controlled this game.
Absolutely. They dominated this game, like you said. Controlled the time of possession, scored 40 points. I mean, that's no freak accident that happened. Like, yeah, they had one kind of like fluky kind of pick six that Jalen Milroe threw. But like other than that, like this game was totally dominated by Vanderbilt. It's not just the best win of the year. I think it's arguably one of the greatest upsets of all time. It's literally David versus Goliath. Like that's literally what it is here, because Alabama is this immovable object that, keep in mind, had just beaten Georgia a week earlier, and that's the number 2 spot in this list, spoiler alert, which makes total sense. But 8 days after beating, arguably what was at the time the best team in the country in Georgia, you go on the road to Nashville and you lose a game that no one expected you to lose to Vanderbilt. And Vanderbilt's been the doormat of the SEC for so long now. But Alabama losing that game, I mean, it's insane that I still can't believe it happened to this day.
I think that's important context to put on it because, again, the week before they played the number 2 game on this list against Georgia. And, Georgia mounted that big gun pack and took the lead briefly, but Alabama still won. And people forget that was Kalen DeBoer's first conference game, welcoming in a Georgia team that had obviously won 2 national championships in, the past 3 years. And everybody said, well, Kalen DeBoer's going to be in for his big wake-up call. And they were able to win that game. And it seemed like at that point, like, hey, this is still the same old Alabama. Nothing's changed. Nothing's going to fall off. And, you thought, okay, maybe they could go to Vanderbilt, be a little bit sleepy after beating a team like Georgia the week before in the emotions of that game. But in no world are they going to go there and get upset. And again, they didn't just get upset. They got dominated. And the world knew Diego Pavia's name coming away from that game. And we obviously saw it plenty more times as the season went along. And of course, this ended up being Alabama's worst team technically since Nick Saban's first year back in 2007. And, if they have another 9-4 type of year, the old seat's going to get pretty warm for Kalen DeBoer pretty fast.
I think some teams would even take 9-4, but it's just the way
Not Alabama.
Not after Nick Saban. Being the guy to follow him was always going to be a really impossible task, honestly. Like, you're never going to be able to top him in any sort of way unless you win X amount of national championships and stuff. But look, it was just a weird year for Alabama. A lot of good moments, but also a lot of bad moments too. So this one was kind of the game that kind of kick-started the questions about what Alabama was looking like under Kalen DeBoer in 2024.
If you're curious what the highest postseason game was, that would be the Chick-fil-A Peach Bowl between Texas and Arizona State that obviously ended up going into overtime, and a game that I think a lot of us were maybe ready to change the channel on when it was 24-8. But Arizona State marks this remarkable comeback, ties it 24, go to the first overtime. Texas converts the 4th and 13 to extend the game, and then they obviously get the interception and end the game there, and it was wildly entertaining when you add in the stakes of advancing to the semifinals in there as well. For a 12-team playoff that didn't feature a ton of great games, this was, I think, by far the best one overall.
Oh, such an entertaining game. I mean, it was a really, really good one. I mean, Arizona State, give them credit. Like, they are a fun team to watch with Cam Scatabo, obviously, just one of the more electric players in college football. That probably doesn't get talked about enough, to be honest. Like, people didn't really start talking about him. It feels like, I mean, obviously diehards probably know him well enough, but the general public probably didn't start talking about him enough until the tail end of the season when Arizona State was in the mix to make the playoff. And Texas is this team, this big name brand that we're all aware of and stuff. First year in the SEC, but I mean, look, at one point in this game, I'm like, all right, Arizona State's going to win this thing. They're going to come back. They're going to win it, and they're gonna handle business. But I mean, look, Texas was able to prevail in the end, and it was a real wild game to say the least.
Yeah, and I think a lot of people sentimentally were rooting for Arizona and the story that would have been, but Texas ends up winning out at the end of the day. And if you don't have a dog in the fight for the playoffs, it's just kind of the games that you hope for. And we didn't get to see a whole lot of them. Some of the the semifinal games are obviously good with Penn State and Notre Dame, and obviously Texas and Ohio State. But yeah, I think the Peach Bowl takes the cake for the funnest postseason game by far.
For sure. Now, do you have a favorite game on this list that maybe is just one of the random ones on here?
Considering they won, I think the Georgia Tech game. That's number 5. Stressful but fun game nonetheless.
No, very good game right there. I'm surprised though at 20, the Northern Illinois upset. I'm surprised that was there.
It ended up being a big deal at the end of the day. We'll see you out at Pro Swing tomorrow, Jack.
All right, see you tomorrow. What's going on, guys? Are you tired of the freezing cold and ready for the Columbia Heat to be back? Well, it's starting to warm up a little bit, but we're not all the way there yet, and it's still getting a little bit chilly out at times. That's why you should go to AAA. Here's some great news. You can buy a new unit today, or there's no payments or interest for 12 months. It's a great deal right there. There's pricing transparency with no hidden charges or fees. There's $1,500 buyback, instant rebate, 15 years parts and labor transferable warranty. There's also 0% interest for qualified buyers and also guaranteed financing. So you can call AAA today like I did, 803-677-1500. Again, that is 803-677-1500. Tell them that you heard about them on 107.5 The Game.
All right, cool. Like I said, Pro Swing tomorrow.
All right. That sounds good.
All right. See you then.
Annual Driving Down Maine virtual golf tournament hosted by United Way at the Midlands is coming up on February 3rd and 4th at the Players Club on 1626 Main Street. Tee times are still available with proceeds benefiting the Midlands Reading Consortium, a partnership between United Way and 18 Midlands elementary schools. Register your team now at uway.org/DDM to reserve your tee time. Is the United Way at the Midlands Driving Down Maine virtual golf
Hey, what's up?
February 3rd and 4th at the Players Club.
Yeah, y'all start at 10:15.
Oh, cool.
So yeah, just actually be on the lookout for him so you can let him in. But yeah, y'all start at 10:15.
Sounds good. Happy Wednesday, bro.
Yeah, good to see you.
You enjoyed the slate this weekend?
Yeah, it was pretty fun.
Bills Chiefs gave us a show like we were expecting.
It didn't give me the outcome that I wanted, but it was a fun game.
You and me both. I
Yeah.
was pulling for Josh Allen.
I wanted Bills Commanders, but I still think Chiefs and Eagles would be a good Super
We're
Bowl.
gonna talk about that first down.
Yeah.
Talk about that first down. Like
Well,
nobody's business.
We'll talk plenty about it.
I've seen so many videos where like they show the line. He's
Yeah.
over that line.
Well, we're in 2025 and we're still using sticks and humans to determine what a first down is, which is crazy. But
yeah.
Is what it is.
Yeah. I'll see you at 15.
All right. What's happening?
How are you?
Good.
Good. So is there anybody particular that I should be prepared to talk an extended time about?
No, just whatever you're feeling.
Okay, if you want to mention the fact, because we're talking about like the future of the new NFL coaching hires, right?
Yes, all the new ones to this point.
Okay, so obviously New Orleans doesn't have their coach yet. There was a hot rumor at is it called CFA, the coaching postseason meetings that were just in Charlotte. There was a hot rumor that everyone on Texas's staff was prepared for Sark to leave. And I don't know if that meant that there was like it got close or if that just meant like they were preparing as if this could happen. But
yeah, I'll send you something in a minute.
Okay.
Cool. Go ahead.
So I don't know if that meant that there was like real traction or they were just preparing for the worst, but Texas was definitely getting their ducks in a row in case they had to do a coaching search.
Interesting. Okay. Yeah, I saw the McCarthy thing yesterday about wait until the next coaching cycle. So I was like, he was in the pole position there.
Yeah, and I think that I think it's pretty clear we're not going to have a college to pro jump. If you want to get into it, we don't have to. But the bubble bath this week is going to be about like,
okay,
hey, would Kirby ever consider? Because what else could he possibly have to do at Georgia?
He's got a nice mansion on.
No, I agree. I don't think he's ever leaving, but I do wonder if he is so adamant about following the Saban path, that does include a diversion into the NFL.
Yeah, we'll see. Ten o'clock. Welcome back in. Hour number 2 of the Extra Point. Tyler Head along with you. Since it is Wednesday, it's time to check in with our guy, Dimitri Ravanos, talk about what's going on in the world of football. And, we've had a lot of news in regards to the hiring cycle in the NFL. And, Dimitri, I hope you've gotten as much enjoyment out of the circus in Dallas as we have so far this week, between just hiring Schottenheimer, it being a Friday news dump, Jerry Jones saying, I don't want to make this about me, but let's make this about me in the press conference. And, the usual shenanigans that we've come to expect out there.
It is absolutely the most embarrassing way this offseason could have gone, right? You run Mike McCarthy out of town. First, you give Mike McCarthy hope to not interview for other jobs. Then you run him out of town. You publicly say that you are on a solo mission to find the coach. You strike out with Deion Sanders. You find out, or I guess word leaks out, that you might be on a solo mission, but the rest of the franchise is not apt to let you run that solo mission. And you end up with your own offensive coordinator as the new head coach. Like, I can't think of a worse way for this to have gone for Jerry.
Well, an offensive coordinator that nobody else was pining for to be their head coach, an offensive coordinator that wasn't calling plays. That was Mike McCarthy's duty. So it wasn't like he was, spinning some great offense out there and say, oh, we see potential in this. Like, no, this is a guy that has gotten to where he's at a lot doing the fact because of what his name is. He's been a career assistant. And now he's been a career assistant, but now he's no longer Brian. He's the head coach of the Cowboys, according to Jerry Jones. So we can't call him Brian Schottenheimer now, I guess, technically speaking.
Let's be real. You said he's gotten to where he is because of what his last name is. For a lot of us in our 40s, his last name is synonymous with good, but just not good enough. Because that was sort of Dad's whole thing during his coaching tenures, his various head coaching tenures in the NFL. I mean, if I'm a Cowboys fan today, like, I don't think I've ever felt more hopeless might be the wrong word, because certainly things got dark after the Switzer years were over under Dave Campo. But I think you have a lot of question marks about what the future of this franchise is.
So I think it's easy to say that that's going to be on the lower end of expectations when it comes to these new coaches that have been hired so far in this NFL coaching cycle. One more that still needs to be hired, which we'll get to coming up here in a minute. But in terms of the guys that do have a strong upside, I think you look at Vrabel. Ben Johnson obviously was conducting great offenses up there.
I have no faith. I have no faith in Vrabel in
You don't have
New
any
England.
faith in Vrabel. Okay.
I think Vrabel's a good coach. I think that he feels some pressure going back to New England to do things the New England way. And you tell me any time in your memory that Josh McDaniels has worked out working for anybody but Bill Belichick. Sorry, we're about to be back in the 90s days of the Patriots of enjoy the top 5 draft pick every year.
That's a very strong possibility. There are a lot of resources to work with. You obviously have Drake May going into now his second year at quarterback. You got a lot of cap space to be able to go out there and get some talent. And obviously Vrabel is somebody that has been a former head coach before with the Titans, where they did have success. How much of that was on him? That's debatable. And there were certainly culture issues down there that ended up pushing him out the door. And God, I think they would love to have him back at this point in time. But again, they've made their decisions down there. Now he's getting a shot there in New England, which seems like a perfect fit given the fact that he played there as a Belichick guy and all those kind of things. But we'll see. I think the general consensus is out of a lot of these new hires, that's the one that has one of the better upsides compared to some of the others.
Maybe. I mean, I think, yeah, you're right. Like Vrabel did have success in Tennessee. I think when you talk about cultural issues, they were between him and the front office, not him and the dudes on his team. I will say about Mike Vrabel whatever I say when fellow Alabama fans bring up Jacob Coker to me. It's amazing how mid you can be and have Derrick Henry make you look like you are all world everything. I mean, I'm not saying Vrabel's not a good coach. I'm saying you cannot dismiss one of the best runs or best years from a running back we've seen since probably before this year with Saquon.
So as far as other proven former head coaches, of course, you have Pete Carroll going out to Las Vegas now. And again, Carroll, obviously, record speaks for itself. What he did at Southern Cal, what he did, obviously, in those early years with the Seahawks. And things kind of fell off in the back couple of years. He obviously didn't want to get out of coaching. They kind of pushed him out to try and put him in one of those front office roles, which he obviously had no interest in. And, you know, in terms of hiring a former Super Bowl winning head coach, I think that's a plus for Las Vegas as opposed to trying to go get some hotshot coordinator to compete with Andy Reid, to compete with Jim Harbaugh, obviously, and to compete with Sean Payton out there in Denver as well. But, you know, I look at the fact that, I saw that Pete Carroll's going to be the oldest head coach in NFL history.
Yeah.
When the season starts, he'll turn, 74 by week number 2. Like, I don't know how long of a play this is. And when you're trying to obviously establish something for the long term, if your coach is only going to be there for 3 or 4 years, what good's that going to do?
Well, and, you know, they are in a position in the draft where it's going to be really hard for them to get one of the top 2 quarterbacks. But really, if you're the Raiders, you need Shedeur. You can't wait for Cam Ward to develop. You need the guy who is NFL ready right now, and they're not going to be in a position to get him. I think one of the biggest wins for the Raiders in Pete Carroll is he is somebody that is unimpeachable when Tom Brady disagrees, right? This is a dude that has a Super Bowl victory, and not only that, has a history of sustained success with the Seahawks in doing it with a quarterback that was certainly developed into one of the best in the league, but was not when they were winning Super Bowls. So I think that is going to be key in terms of how they build this thing. You're right. This might be a 4, maybe 5 year kind of cycle, but if in those 5 years, Pete Carroll can put in place the pieces that get the Raiders to being competitive, I think it was worth it. I think that given the fact that Aaron Glenn has to deal with the jetsiness of the Jets, I think Pete Carroll is probably my favorite hire this cycle. And I don't love it. Ben Johnson, I'm just always going to be skeptical of the hot offensive coordinator candidate, particularly what you saw in that game against the Commanders. Like, I think Johnson is very interested in, and I think we went through this in Carolina with Dave Canales. Like, I think that there are times that he would rather show you how big his brain is than learn the difference between calling plays and coaching a team.
Yeah. And I'll kind of group Johnson, Liam Cohen, and Aaron Glenn all together here, guys that have all never obviously been head coaches, going to tough situations to varying degrees. And, you know, it's one thing to be a good coordinator and call the right plays and have good talent and all that kind of stuff. It's another thing to completely rebuild organizations that are struggling, which all 3 of those obviously are. And, you know, the Liam Cohen thing, we obviously got our laugh about the way that he said Duval the other day, but you bring up Dave Canales, who is credited so much with kind of rehabilitating Baker Mayfield. Liam Cohen comes in for 1 year and, you know, guides the offense along, but it wasn't the world-beating, most spectacular offense in the world. And then you have the weirder stuff with him wanting the job, not wanting the job, Trent Baalke being retained, Trent Baalke being fired, and now you end up with him. It just seems like a mess from the jump that I don't know how successful it's going to end up being.
I mean, I disagree that it seems like a mess. If you are going to be the highest paid coordinator in the NFL and what you want is a head coaching job, you take the head coaching job every time. Like, give me a break. The whining coming out of Tampa is the dumbest thing I've ever seen come out of Tampa. And remember, Hulk Hogan is from there. I think that the Cohen thing is interesting. Certainly he comes into the best quarterback situation. And I think Shad Khan, the owner of the Jaguars, I think he wants to win. And I think getting rid of Baalke is realizing that if you want to do whatever it takes to win, you can't have this guy on staff. I'm optimistic about what could be, but I don't know that I believe it will be. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I get
Like
that.
I think they have the pieces. I think they have the want to, but history is not on the side of just believe in the Jaguars.
Yeah, again, they don't necessarily have a track record, which amazingly enough, they were 7 years removed from them being in the AFC Championship game with Blake Bortles,
With
which
Blake
seems
Bortles
like
of all people, yeah.
exactly like an alternate reality that almost became a thing of them making the Super Bowl. Which, by the way, that defense was good enough, and they had a
Mhm.
lead on the Patriots in the fourth quarter of that game. I believe that things kind of went sideways there, but it's obviously a fall from grace since then. They had the one playoff appearance with Peterson, and then this past year was obviously crater with Trevor Lawrence getting hurt and everything. So big rebuild down there. Also needing a big rebuild down in New Orleans, and we're sitting here at the end of January. All these other spots have been filled. It seemed like Mike McCarthy was destined to become the next head coach of the Saints, but yesterday he says, you know what, I'm going to take this year off and I'll get back in the hiring cycle coming up in 2026. Seems like nobody wants this job.
Yeah, I mean, look, they have one of the worst roster situations in the NFL. They do not have the quarterback of the future for sure. I mean, look, all apologies to Spencer Rattler reporters, like he ain't the dude in the NFL. They don't even have their quarterback of next year. Like it feels like they are stuck with Derek Carr more than they are interested in Derek Carr, and their cap situation is absolute hell. So if you are Kellen Moore, the offensive coordinator of the Eagles, who seems to be the most likely guy to be hired now, the way you are going to be viewed is a little more forgiving than the way Mike McCarthy is going to be viewed. I think McCarthy is smart enough to recognize that no matter what his numbers say, whether it is because of his appearance, the fact that he did so much of it with Aaron Rodgers, like everybody puts an asterisk next to how successful he has been in the playoffs in their head. And if you're Mike McCarthy, you don't have time to wait for this team to be playoff ready. Kellen Moore might. And so maybe it's a little bit more, I don't think appealing is the right word, but tolerable, I think, if you are in your 30s and getting your first crack at a head coaching job.
But at the same time, and look, I thought Kellen Moore was going to be the guy for the Dallas job, given his previous history there. The Jones family seemed to love him, and he would fit the puppet strings that Jerry Jones likes to attach to all of his head coaches. If you're Kellen Moore, do you want to take this job, or would you be willing to wait for something that's a little bit of a better situation to go into potentially next year?
So I hear you. I absolutely hear you. The Commanders are coming, man. The Commanders are coming, and I don't know that you saw anything out of that Eagles offense this year that made you think, oh, that's more, that's what Moore brought to this offense. They look exactly like they did 2 years ago when Shane Steichen was the offensive coordinator, and they went to the Super Bowl. Plus, like with who's the Nick Sirianni? Like it's a volatile situation there between the coaching staff and the players. So I think in his situation, like I don't think you wait. I think if you get the chance, you go.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see. And again, his name's still thought of very highly. And again, he did some good things in Dallas before, they moved on from him and Mike McCarthy became the play caller. So thought of pretty highly. And again, it just, I guess theoretically you're going to the South, which is a easier division to win. The Falcons threw it away and gave it to Tampa this year, but you're still looking at only having to be a 9 to 10 win team to win that division each and every year. So I guess the potential to get back to the playoffs for a team like the Saints isn't astronomically high. The challenge of getting there isn't astronomically high. And I don't know, again, like all these other coordinators, you just never know what a guy's going to be when he has to be put in charge of the entire thing. So if it is indeed Kellen Moore, because that seems like the only prospect they really have left, we'll see what happens.
I'm trying to figure out who the other possibilities are. It doesn't seem like we're going to get that jump from college. I feel like we would be like knee deep in hearing about those interviews to this point. Like I think the Saints are zeroed in on Moore.
Before I let you go, you did mention for your weekly bubble bath segment,
yes, sir,
you do have an interesting college name that might be thinking about the NFL at some point.
It's not so much that I have any knowledge that he's thinking about the NFL. It is just like, I wonder if Kirby Smart really does idolize and value his time with Nick Saban and wants to follow that path. There is an NFL diversion on it. He's 49. Yep. He's already done more than any other coach in Georgia history. Like, I just wonder at some point, do you feel like either A, it's time for a new challenge, or B, you would like to be somewhere where you don't have to answer questions about traffic laws every offseason?
You bring up an interesting point. I would bet on the side of no if I had to put my money on it, though.
I would agree. He seems too much like a Lake Beach kind of guy to ever want to leave. To ever want to leave Georgia.
Yeah, I don't think he's going to go anywhere anytime soon. Appreciate it as always, Dimitri, and we'll check in with you next week.
All right, Tyler. Talk to you then.
It is the Extra Point. We'll dive back into men's basketball. Jalen and Sam joining me on the other side on your Wednesday here on the game.
No, I leave this on, but I mute my computer. Mute your computer.
And welcome back in. It is the Extra Point on your Wednesday. Tyler Head along with you. Full house for the rest of the 10 o'clock hour. Always joined by Jalen Tart on Wednesdays. Had to shift things around this week because, well, you know, in the news industry, they tend to change their schedule a lot. And Sam was not able to join us on Monday, so he's in here with us today. So, guys, how we doing?
I'm doing all right. Just another day in paradise, Tyler.
Yeah. Well, wasn't necessarily paradise for men's basketball last night on the road to Georgia. This was a game out of all the 8 games they played so far. This seemed like a very winnable one. Georgia was on a 4-game losing streak. Georgia themselves struggled with turnovers. And South Carolina, unfortunately, goes in there, turns the ball over a ton of times again last night, and can't get past a winnable type of team like Georgia.
Yeah, I mean, and when you see that the series was kind of split between these two, you're going into this thinking, all right, this is going to be the first conference matchup that they could maybe walk away with a win, but it didn't really pan out that way.
I had confidence that they would win this game after having 2 heartbreaking losses to Florida and to Mississippi State, thinking that they would come in and shock Georgia, but they dug themselves into a hole that they tried to get out of, but they just could not get out of at the end result of the game.
And there comes a point during a season when you just are what you are in terms of the things that you do. And you guys watch basketball for a long time. Turnovers just become a thing at some point. If you're struggling to pass the ball, if you can't dribble the ball without bouncing it off your knee or your foot and it going out of bounds, that just becomes a plague. And unfortunately for this Gamecock team, that's become a thing. Over these past handful of games in conference, they're turning the ball over at least 15 times per game, and another 17 last night. Like, that's not something that's just going to get fixed overnight. It is, you are who you are at this point, which is terrible to say, but it's not going to suddenly get better.
It's like having like a song that you don't want to hear on repeat every single day. I mean, that's just been the name of the game. I think 17 turnovers was the number that was recorded in the game yesterday. And I'm looking at this team and it's just like, how do you fix the turnovers? How do you take better care of the basketball in crucial moments of the game? I said this last week. I just think that if they can clean that up and get scoring from key guys like Zachary Davis, who went 2 for 10 from the field, who's a very good player, who played a really good game against Mississippi State last week, you got to clean those up in order for you to stay in contests like you had against Georgia as of last night.
Yeah, and I was kind of saying last week too, turnovers are definitely the main problem, but I think rebounding has also been kind of an issue for this Gamecock team as well. You kind of have Murray, Boyles, and Pringle that are cleaning up the majority of the boards. You saw that more in that overtime loss to Mississippi State, but in this matchup against Georgia, it looks a little bit more widespread. But again, when you're turning the ball over 17 times, it's a little bit more of a glaring issue.
But Sam, to back up to your point, it can't just be Pringle and Murray Boyles collected the rebounds. I think everyone has to collectively crash the board as a team to you get those rebounds. I just feel like it's certain players on the team that's playing, but not a collective unit to play as one unit to get the wins that they need to get.
Yeah, they're not playing like a team.
Well, and there's an effort, a degree of physicality you also have to play with, especially in the SEC. And I know Carolina blocked a couple of shots last night, but it felt like Georgia was blocking everything that Carolina had near the basket. Asa Newell, Dylan James blocking 5 out of the 6 shots that Georgia had last night. It just, and we knew that Carolina was kind of at a size disadvantage considering what Georgia had on the roster. But we've seen that time and time again. The physicality has just not been there. At least it's been in waves for Carolina where it's not consistent over the course of 40 minutes. And, I've given credit to Coach Paris for having this team still locked in and engaged despite of these losses. Because again, you don't erase a 14-point deficit and take a Mississippi State team to overtime on Saturday if you don't care, if you're not trying. Last night, again, Carolina put together a little bit in the second half to make it interesting, but not enough to obviously, amount a comeback there. So they're trying, they're giving it their all. They're just not a good enough team to stack up with these opponents.
And shooting overall, I mean, Georgia shot 51% from the field, 46.7% from the three, where Carolina from the three-point line only shot 23.5%, 4 of 17 from the three-point line. You can't have that if you're going to go on the road and try to get your first win in the SEC. Can't happen.
I just think what the most frustrating thing with this is a lot of these games are just really, really close. Like, they just haven't been able to close the game. It's not necessarily even that they're playing, a high level of basketball, because they're playing pretty well. But when you look at conference play, like they're a 500 team. They're pretty solid. They've just letting this game to Florida go, letting this Mississippi State game go, and the Auburn game. I mean, it's frustrating, especially when you have games like Oklahoma where they got completely blown out. You're looking at those games like, well, the Auburn game was close, the Florida game was close. How are we getting blown out by Oklahoma by 20? So it just seems like no matter what the situation is, it's a Charlie Brown scenario where you're pulling away the football and he's missing the punt.
And it's one thing if they were just getting their doors blown off every single game by 20 or 30 points, you just say, okay, well, this team just is not that good overall. Like, no, they're showing you the ability to stay in these games against really high quality opponents. It's just not being able to finish. And winning is something, the winning mentality is something you either have or you don't. You're either a winner or you're a loser. And this team, unfortunately, up to this point in conference play, has shown they cannot close out. They fall apart when it really comes down to it. Go back to the Mississippi State game on Saturday where you'd played a relatively good game and tied it up at the end of regulation. And then you had 5 turnovers in 5 minutes in overtime. And again, that's not going to get done. You made 1 field goal in that period of time as well. Like, it's just, it comes and goes and it ebbs and flows. And again, the mistakes end up compounding themselves, unfortunately, in the way of turnovers seemingly every single game.
And it's not going to get easier for Carolina moving forward, where you got to play 5 ranked teams in the month of February. And one of those teams you already played in Florida. I mean, I don't know what Lamont Paris is going to do or what players need to step up, but now is the time to step up now that you have a full week to prepare for Texas A&M.
Well, that's the thing. And Jack and I talked about this in the last hour. It's not like there's some magic elixir on the bench that's going to come in and change everything. You have Cam Scott, which, again, has a very high upside considering the prospect that he was coming out of high school, but he's played a lot this year and hasn't really shown you what you thought he was going to be. Now, I agree that at some point you kind of know that the season's lost and you're kind of punting on it anyway. So put him out there for more minutes, let him learn and set him up better for next season coming up. But again, there's nobody you can just suddenly insert in the starting lineup, it seems like, that's going to change the fortunes of what this team has been.
I think it's a trust issue as well, because me personally, I went to the game against Mississippi State and I'm watching his body language and he doesn't look engaged with the game of him being ready. So I don't know if it's a trust issue or is him just not being prepared.
Now, I think for that game, he was sick with the flu. So that may have had something to do with it for that game particularly.
I think what could benefit this team would be watching maybe the last 5 or 10 minutes of some of these 1 or 2 score games and just deciphering or depicting which certain turnover plays, what were those momentum changing plays that kind of completely put the ball in their court and took it away from South Carolina. So I think if you kind of brush up on those, you can get rid of maybe, 1 or 2 turnovers that would have cost you the game. And then you're still winning a game, even though you're turning the ball over 15 times.
And you got to be efficient shooting the basketball off the turnovers as well. So you can capitalize and stay in the game as well.
This team wasn't shooting pretty efficiently from behind the 3-point line until maybe a few weeks ago.
Yeah. They've yet to score 70 points in a conference game so far. And again, like, the defense is giving you enough in a lot of these games to be competitive, but the offense and then obviously the turnovers in line with that are just what's absolutely killing you. And again, I don't see any reason why this is suddenly going to change. And again, you're about to play 4 more ranked teams in a row, starting with A&M coming up on Saturday night, where, I'm just kind of assuming we're going to be talking about them being 0-12 here in a couple weeks. I hate to be that pessimistic, but they haven't shown me enough to think otherwise.
I'd like to at least see 1-11.
If it just don't lose every game.
Yeah.
If you only win 1 game, that's better than going 0-18.
Oh yeah.
I mean, it is possible that they could win 1, but how worse can it get for you not to win a conference game right now on January the 29th, 2025?
Yeah, again, over in the month of January. You have not won a game since you beat Presbyterian a month ago tomorrow. Your next chance is not going to come till February on Saturday when you play A&M. Like, again, you wonder when the morale just sinks and this team just rolls over.
And A&M is a really good defensive team to deal with, to not be in a slump like what they were last night.
The benefit, that game's at home. I will say that. You play better at home, as most teams in the SEC do. So I look at that game. I look at Ole Miss coming up in a couple weeks. You got those games at home.
And then you got Florida.
I think you're going to play those games tight, but going to Kentucky, going to Florida, I expect those games to be pretty lopsided.
It's probably going to be a long SEC, a long February worth of conference play, especially for this game.
It's already been a long January. Why can't February be long too? Unfortunately.
Well, hopefully it'll be warmer. Maybe they'll have that going for them at least.
Yeah, well, we'll see. It's been a tough season so far, and again, still 10 more games to go in the regular season as far as conference play. We have a Super Bowl that has been set given this past weekend's conference championship games. How good will the Super Bowl be, and how interested will people be? We'll dive into that coming up next. It is the Extra Point Tyler Head, along with Sam and Jalen on your Wednesday here on the game.
That was good.
We bounce off each other pretty nice.
Yeah, we just gotta build it.
Well, yeah, it doesn't usually happen overnight. I usually when I go on with other people, I'm like, I don't know what the heck to say, but like I feel like, I mean, I'm not just saying it too. I feel like we bounce off each other.
I feel like we do as well. I think when we have like the right
Bangers and mash alongside the best of regional American comfort food.
Welcome back in. It is the Extra Point. Tyler, Sam, and Jalen hanging out here on your Wednesday morning. Reminder, again, tomorrow and Friday, Hole 107.5, the game crew, going to be out at Pro Swing in Forest Acres for the first annual Pro Swing Golf Classic. Again, you can sign up if you've not already for just $150 for a two-person team. Available bookings from 8 a.m. to 8 p.m. Food included. You can win $1,000 for first place, $750 for second, $500 for third. We're also going to be drawing Gamecock baseball season tickets for somebody just for registering. So give Pro Swing a call at 803-528-1617. Again, 803-528-1617 for their first annual Pro Swing Golf Classic running Thursday through Saturday. And again, we're going to be out there all day tomorrow and Friday as well. A week from Sunday, we get Super Bowl 59, a rematch of the Super Bowl from a couple years ago between the Chiefs and the Eagles. Probably not the matchup that everybody was cheering for. I know personally I was hoping for a Bills-Commanders Super Bowl. But when we look at the ratings for this past Sunday's conference championship game, 58 million people watched the Chiefs beat the Buffalo Bills, which is a record for the AFC Championship. A little bit of a dip when it came to the NFC, 44.2 million watched the Eagles dominate the Washington Commanders, which is the lowest viewed NFC Championship game since 2018 between the Rams and the Saints. But still, you're talking about a combined 100 million people watching these games on Sunday. And I imagined it's going to be probably a pretty well-viewed Super Bowl, as unexcited as some people might be for it here in a couple of weeks.
Well, Sunday night.
Sorry, I was gonna say one of those factors is the Chiefs. People didn't want the Chiefs to get in. No one expected. Everybody was probably rooting for the Cardiac Commanders, the Washington Commanders, to get in. But hey, I'm okay with it. But it's kind of hard not to watch it because you really got Jalen Hurts, who is trying to resurge himself as one of the top quarterbacks, versus Patrick Mahomes, who is trying to go for destiny to be the first team to three-peat in the NFL. That's never happened before.
Yeah, I think the storyline for either of these teams winning this rematch game, like you said, Jalen, are great because you either got the Jalen Hurts revenge tour or you've got Patrick Mahomes solidifying, a historic feat that no other quarterback in the NFL has done before. So that's the only reason I'm okay with this matchup. Otherwise, I would have really liked to see Lions-Bills.
And Kendrick Lamar.
Yeah, well, you can still see Kendrick Lamar regardless, and obviously the commercials. But it's really interesting the debate around the Chiefs. And look, I thought the Bills were a fun team to watch this year. I thought overall they were a more complete team in a lot of ways offensively than the Chiefs, and I think that would have been fun to see them in Super Bowl. But obviously they couldn't get over the hump once again in the playoffs against the Chiefs, so don't get that opportunity. It's really funny when you talk about the Chiefs and this dominance they've been on, because everybody hates dynasties, right? When we don't want to see the same teams win over and over again, which is why so many of us wanted to see a fresh matchup, a new face, at least in the AFC, playing in the Super Bowl here in a couple weeks. Not going to get that. Going to get the third opportunity for the Chiefs to win a Super Bowl in the row. Obviously, it would be 4 over the past 5 years. So they're able to get it done. And when we're in the middle of that dominance and that dynasty happening, it's very negative. They're getting favorable treatment. We don't want to see them win over and over again. Sick of this guy, sick of that guy. It's years after the fact. So when Mahomes retires, when Andy Reid's in the Hall of Fame, then we're all going to look back and say, if they do end up getting the 3P, man, remember that time the Chiefs won 3 Super Bowls in a row? How amazing was that? I'm so glad I got to be a fan viewing the greatness of the Chiefs and Mahomes and Andy Reid and Travis Kelce and Chris Jones and all this kind of stuff. It's really funny how the retrospective changes years after the fact.
Yeah, I definitely agree. And I do think there are a small pocket of people that are outside of, Kansas City or that bubble that are saying, we are witnessing history. If you, like Nick Burleson went on the desk the other night and he said, if you're rooting against the Chiefs, I don't know how you could, because we are witnessing history literally live in front of us. And that is a great point. But when you also look at the repeated videos on Twitter of Josh Allen literally carrying the ball over the pylon, and everyone's debating, well, there's a pylon, you can't really see. I mean, this is like, what, his 3rd or 4th go at trying to beat Patrick Mahomes in the postseason, whether it's the AFC Championship or the Super Bowl or excuse me, the divisional or the championship game. And it's like, being a suffering Jets fan my entire life, I can't imagine being a Bills fan, because I don't really know which alternative is worse now.
And obviously they had the run of losing 4 straight Super Bowls, and now they can't even get back to it because Patrick Mahomes is standing in the way.
I was literally just about to say that they lost 4 Super Bowls in a row, and now that it's a new generation with a generational type quarterback in Josh Allen, who I personally thought was going to get them there with how they were going, how the game was going. It's I do feel bad for the Buffalo Bills fans, but at the same time too, they had a really, really, really good year. And if history needs to be rewritten for Patrick Mahomes for him to win a third straight Super Bowl, now is the time to do it, because if they don't get it done in the next 2 weeks, we may not ever see a team three-peat or attempt to three-peat again in the NFL.
Or at least in our lifetimes.
Yeah, and that's a good point. There's such rarefied air to be able to accomplish that, because so many teams' Super Bowl windows are very, very narrow. So to have an opportunity to potentially win 3 in a row, you're right. We may never ever see it, but again, considering the fact that it's never happened before in the prior 58 Super Bowls that we've had up to this point. My question on the other side, when it comes to the Philadelphia Eagles, are we ready for how insufferable Nick Sirianni would be if he finally won a Super Bowl? Because this guy's already like a handful before that fact, and very successful coach. Obviously, he's now gotten the Eagles to his second Super Bowl. But man, you get that guy a Lombardi Trophy, I don't think he's ever going to shut up.
I don't think he will, but I feel like he wouldn't be the star, the guy in the light. The guy in the light will be either Jalen Hurts or Saquon Barkley.
But he would find a way to get himself in the light.
Yeah.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
He would definitely stick his neck in there and be like, look at me. This is what I contributed to this Super Bowl run. And I actually forgot he didn't even win that recent one with Nick Foles and Jay Ajayi against the Patriots.
That was Doug Peterson.
Yeah. So this would be like, his ego at this point would be a hot air balloon through the roof.
And then he would probably do something if they win at the parade and it would go viral. But he was the talk of the team at the beginning of the season of how they were performing, and he was on the hot seat. And sure enough, since October, he's turned it around to where he's not the typical focus of the team. Saquon Barkley, Jalen Hurts, AJ Brown. And it's not just them, but everyone was trying to, see, is Jalen Hurts the guy? Will he be able to lead his team back to the Super Bowl in a critical NFC championship game?
Well, also,
and sure enough, he did.
This offense is also just clicking at the right time, I think. I mean, Saquon Barkley's playing like he did at Penn State right now. Jalen Hurts, has kind of been lights on, nobody home towards the end of this regular season.
He impressed me a lot on Sunday. I didn't know how healthy he was going to be against Commanders, and he went out there and made a lot of plays, which bodes well for them in a week and a half as well.
Definitely gives Philly some hope, at least in the pass game, going into this Super Bowl matchup now, because I was looking at the last 3 weeks like, okay, they're literally not going to be able to throw the ball. I mean, concussed being on the field, and even that 130-yard performance, I believe, in the divisional matchup. Like, it's interesting because he's now with this last game, you've kind of seen, okay, now the pass offense has kind of started to come back. We saw more inklings, I feel like, of that in the beginning of the year when the team wasn't gelled completely. But now that Saquon has kind of found his place in that offense as kind of the centerpiece, it's kind of the pass game's almost complementary to that. And now it's all gelling together at the right time, which is why they kind of peaked, I think, towards the end of the year, and now are in a position to hopefully rain on Mahomes' parade.
And their defense has improved as well. Acquiring Vic Fangio in the offseason was a big, big asset for the Eagles.
Especially because you had Reddick.
And yeah, now that you have, Jalen Carter and Jordan Davis playing out of their minds, and their defense is very simple, but they're very, very effective. So I'm very interested to see what Vic Fangio's game plan is against this high-powered Chiefs offense, of how to get to Patrick Mahomes and to get him out of the pocket and scrambling. But how are they going to cover their receivers in Travis Kelce and Xavier Worthy?
Yeah, and again, the defense are the strengths of both these teams. It could be a 1st 20 type of game coming up in a week and a half, and we'll talk about it more coming up next week as well. To wrap up hour number 2 of the Extra Point, a decision has finally been made for the men's basketball national championship that's moving in the right direction, but I feel like we could do things a little bit better. We'll dive into that coming up next. It is the Extra Point. Tyler, Sam, and Jalen on your Wednesday here on The Game. And welcome back in. It is the Extra Point. Tyler Head hanging out with Sam Shapiro and Jalen Tart here on your Wednesday on the game. Reminder tonight, Carolina calls Coach Staley coming up at 6 o'clock right here on the game. Coach Paris coming up tomorrow night. Still trying to talk about finding a way to potentially win a game for the Gamecocks as they're still searching for that first conference win. When the college basketball season comes to an end in early April, of course, the national championship game will be played on a Monday night as always. News came down yesterday. That's a positive. They are moving the tip-off time up 30 whole minutes from 9:20 to 8:50 p.m. A step in the right direction. Feel like more work could be done, but it drives people crazy. And like college football did a better job of this in recent years. They moved the kickoff from like 8:20 for the national championship to like 7:40, 7:45. So a little bit better. So we're not staying up until midnight watching the national championship. But college basketball has been a bad offender of this for a while because, you know, especially with the commercials and stuff, you're talking about a game that lasts well past 11 o'clock, getting into the 11:30 range sometimes, you know, going all the way to midnight or whatever it may be. So we're scaling it back a little bit, though. Again, I still think more work can be done, but nice to see them at least take a positive step.
Well, me and Jalen were just talking over the break. I mean, you could start by making it on the weekend.
That'd be nice.
But I think an earlier start time we were talking about would definitely be great.
At least 7:30.
Yeah.
7:30 on a Monday would be cool. 8:50 is like when people are
still pretty late
putting their kids to bed and winding down.
You're talking about a 2+ hour game, so you're still creeping past 11 o'clock. And again, basketball's a shorter game than football is, but you started at 7:45 or even 8 o'clock. Again, you're wrapping up by 10:15, 10:30. I think that's reasonable.
Before the 10 o'clock news, yeah.
Before the 10 o'clock news, that kind of thing, which you know, is always good to do. And again, you got to think about the audience, right? And again, not everybody can stay up until midnight watching these games, and some people like to go to bed early. You got to get up for work or school or whatever the next day. So again, we're making a step in the right direction, but I agree with you. I'd love it to be on the weekend.
I mean, if it's 7:30 too, like that's after all of our main newscasts anyway. So you've got nothing else really going on. You've kind of got your night started. You could probably still be sitting eating dinner, and then on the West Coast it's 4:30, so you're still even enjoying your afternoon. So you could watch this game and then have plenty of ample time to do a couple things before you go to bed.
That is something to remember with these kind of things when it comes to the West Coast, because especially in basketball, a sport that is heavily viewed, especially when it comes to college basketball on the other coast there, they do have to account for those viewers. So saying, all right, I know it's going to start at 9:30 on the East Coast, but that's 6:30 on the West Coast. So we're getting a lot of people home from work and eating dinner with their family and stuff like that. So I imagine that goes into that decision a lot. Again, I'll take 8:50 over 9:20 any day of the week. So it's nice, but you know, and I get it with the way the tournament's structured, and you have the Elite Eight the weekend before, and you know, the Final Four games are on Saturday for a Monday national championship. But if we could find a way to move these things back like 2 days to where, you know, you're playing the national championship on a Saturday, and in fact, incorporate it with the women, because the women play their Final Four games on Friday. They play the national championship on Sunday. Why not do it all in one day? And I get it's on different networks. The women are on ESPN and the men are on, you know, CBS. But man, if you had, let's say, the women's national championship game at 5 o'clock on Saturday afternoon as the lead in to the men's national championship game at 8 o'clock on Saturday night, that'd be phenomenal. You get like almost a full day worth of huge championship basketball, play the Final Four games on, I guess, Thursday or Wednesday or whatever it may be. And again, you got to move back to the Elite Eight and all those kind of things. But man, you just love to see, like the college football national championship, it end on a weekend.
Or you can just move women's basketball to have their Final Four on a Thursday and have their national championship on a Saturday, and then have the men's do their Final Four on a Friday and then have theirs on a Sunday. That way, when you start the week,
you still want to separate them.
I do like having the men and women kind of in conjunction with each other too, because it keeps the same demographic of viewers engaged at the same time, arguably on two different products. And then, you know, we're also getting to a point where like women's basketball is kind of blowing up. And even last year, people cared more about the women's tournament than the men's tournament.
Yeah.
So if you kind of group it together, then you'll have that same audience caring just as much about both, you know, products of basketball.
You know why that is? Because men's basketball doesn't have the superstars they used to have. But between one and done and all this kind of stuff, like you have guys that come in and the best players are gone in a year, in the blink of an eye. You don't have guys that hang around for, you know, 2, 3, and 4 years anymore that can kind of establish that rapport where women's basketball, I think last year was the best year for women's basketball in terms of the talent that you had, as well as the dynamic personalities. Just here personally, you had Camila Cardoso and what she did from just a pure dominant standpoint on the court. You had Angel Reese, you had Caitlin Clarks, you had Haley Van Lith, you had all these great talents across the country that were all factors in the run to the national championship, which culminated between the game that everybody wanted to see, Caitlin Clark pursuing a national championship against the best team right now in South Carolina. And obviously Carolina ended up coming out on the winning side of things. But, when the men played their national championship, Dane Hurley is an easy guy to dislike. But outside of that, it just didn't have the angle or the feeling behind it.
Like now, leading into it, know that there's both women's and men's basketball still in the conference play. You really got Hannah Hidalgo and Juju Watkins and Paige Beckers, who is in her final farewell tour. And on the men, it's Cooper Flagg. Cooper Flagg is the highlight of the men's side of things. So it's interesting to see these storylines. It needs to be more storylines in the men's as well. But the women's taking over.
And again, just with the structure of the men's game now, it just doesn't work that way. You have a couple players here, there, Janai Broom, guys like that, and Mark Sears at Alabama that can garner headlines, but they're not superstars like you saw in the women's game last year.
Right.
And then when you have like these kind of storylines throughout, it makes you kind of feel like you're right there with the player, kind of watching them on the court. And because, you have this kind of continuation of the Cardoza, Angel Reese, Caitlin Clark arc, now kind of segueing to what you were saying, Juju Watkins and Paige Buckers. You still have people going, oh, look, there are still superstars that are carrying this game and are so exciting to keep watching.
You guys know, if the news doesn't tell a story, nobody's going to care, right?
Yeah.
Boom. There you go. That'll do it for today's edition of the Extra Point. Coming up next, Gamecock Central Takeover Hour presented by Firehouse Subs on this Wednesday here on the game.